Hey everyone, welcome today. Danica, your background is so beautiful. Makes me want to be there. Wherever
Thank
it
you.
is.
It's one of the nature trails at Foxwoods.
Nice. So we'll get started in just a little bit. I'm on location at AECT in Orlando, Florida, where I gave a presentation this morning on learning engineering. And I was excited to be in sunny and warm Orlando, but it's not warm, it's just sunny.
Are you going out much, Erin?
Well, I got here really late Sunday night, so that was too late to do anything. And went out to dinner last night. We'll go out to dinner again tonight, and then I leave to come back tomorrow. So
They didn't give you like a day pass to Disney.
no, haven't had the chance.
Oh.
Actually, we're close. We're like right across the street from Universal, which I've never been. So
If you're like a learning engineering thing at Hogwarts, maybe they want it there.
yeah, I could go and talk to them about learning engineering. That would be great.
Should we wait another minute or two before we get started?
Yeah, let's wait another minute or two.
Mhm.
Unless we have all the usual suspects. Learning engineering for the dark arts. I love it. Be fun.
Erin, I wanted to let you know I did email your friend Ann. I just found her response in my junk mail. How crazy is that? But I've been following her on LinkedIn and I'm emailing her back right this minute. I assume she's at that conference with you from her email?
She
Yeah.
is.
Perfect, perfect.
She was one of my co-presenters this morning.
Neat,
And
neat.
actually the main person who wrote up the proposal and everything. So yeah. Yeah, she told me you reached out. So yeah, I'm glad you found her response.
Yeah, she wrote back on the 11th, which was the day after I wrote her. So I never look in this junk thing, but since the Canvas thing went there, I've been like, what else is in there? I never look over there. So I just peeked at it, but I'm glad I found it. So thank you for connecting with her. She has some interesting stuff.
Oh yeah. She is a wealth of information. I joke that every time I'm with her in any like just even a 5-minute conversation, I walk away with a whole bunch of new resources I want to check out.
Yeah, absolutely. Her website's really awesome as well. Yeah.
Okay, Tanvi, well, let's get started. I think we have the crowd we're gonna have for today. So Tanvi is gonna kick us off.
Erin, I don't have screen sharing
Well,
enabled.
that would help, right? Yeah, there you go.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everyone. So today we'll be talking about developing assessments and what are some methods that we are using for developing complex assessments or even thinking about assessments. Awesome. So this is the agenda. We are talking about cognitive task analysis some of the different types of cognitive task analysis. We'll also be doing a small activity in relation to your project and have you do a theoretical cognitive task analysis. And then we'll be talking about writing good assessments, discussion around how we can align them to CLE and BLAMES based on what you have read earlier. And then also alignment with respect to the whole backwards design process. And then talking a little bit about writing good feedback and practices in writing good assessments. We'll also be doing a short demo of developing assessments within Taurus. So I think that is all for today. And then we'll be having a Q&A session post that demo. So before we dive deeper into cognitive task analysis, I wanted to talk about some housekeeping stuff. Related to your project work, it is beneficial for us to review it in one document. So we recommend that some of you have already started doing this, where you have all your like step 1 project work, step 2 project work, all of them in the same document. But if you're not doing that, we recommend doing it, submitting the same document, even if it has the earlier work in there. That's fine. Just having like it as one single document is helpful when we start reviewing further steps. And also ensure that when you're submitting the new step, it would also be helpful to make the changes based on the feedback that was provided within that particular week. And then for writing assessments within your course or for your project, this week we have the assignment for writing assessments. And for this week, we have a condition of having at least one question per learning objective. But then overall, we want you to know that ultimately it's a good practice to have at least 3 questions per learning objective. And as you work on designing the course, even after this learning engineering fellowship program, it is always a good practice to have at least 3 questions per learning objective, as that would help us collect more data towards generating good learning curves, which we will be talking about at a later point within this course. And then the third thing is, I think we received, I think, a question about some of you are not able to view your submissions even though you have submitted it. And so don't worry about that. We are able to view all your submissions, even if you are not able to view it from your end. The system is changing a lot right now. And so it's a little bit newer to us, and we are making updates within the course as we go. And so we didn't realize that making those changes would impact changes within your student interface as well. But know that all your submissions are visible to us, even though they are not visible to you. Any questions around this? Awesome. Now moving on to cognitive task analysis. Some of you may have already read about one method of cognitive task analysis, that is the difficulty factors assessment within the paper for readings this week. But I also wanted to let you know that even though it's like a fancy term, it's something that you might have already been incorporating within your practice. It is breaking down of steps within a problem or within a task in different stages. And so it might be something that you might have already been doing, but you might have not been calling it this. So we don't want you to feel like this is something overwhelming or new. It might be something that you have already incorporated within your practice, but there are some different methods that are being used and studies that have been conducted using these methods. And so some of them are highlighted within the papers, and some of them we'll be presenting to you right now. Cognitive task analysis is a term that is used to describe a set of methods that we use to specify the cognitive structure and processes associated with a particular task. And the focus point of the task analysis is the underlying cognitive processes rather than just thinking about what might be the observable behaviors that we want from students. Um, Another defining characteristics of cognitive task analysis is thinking about it from the perspective of novices and experts. That is, sometimes it might be faculty and students, or sometimes it might be researchers and um, novices within a field. So um, there are differences in how we are conducting CTA between all of these audiences. And then how we map cognitive task analysis to our definition of the CLE framework. So in this image, as discussed last week, you can see the CLE framework, which is highlighted, where you have instructional events on the right-hand side, such as explanations, practice, text, rules, examples, and teacher-student discussion, which lead to learning event, which is at the bottom right. And then those learning events lead to and are led to by change in knowledge components within a student's brain. And knowledge components then lead to performance on assessment events that you see on the left hand side, such as exams and belief surveys, or any other assessment events. Some events such as questions, feedback, and steps in intelligent tutoring systems are both assessment and instructional events. And so the cognitive task analysis specifies the cognitive structures associated with knowledge components. And then like those knowledge components are associated basically with the task performance. So a question for everyone here. If you can't observe everything that an expert knows, how can you discover the unobservable cognition of a task? A, by asking experts what they know, or by performing a cognitive task analysis to discover how they complete a task, or by conducting a comprehensive literature review of the topic, or by conducting a brain scan. And as you can see, there is an image on the right-hand side, which shows a metaphorical representation of expert knowledge, which can be likened to an iceberg, where we are seeing that above the water, there is the observability line, which shows things that we are able to observe when observing an expert. But then there are things below the line, which is like below the tip of the iceberg, which you can see is a large amount of the iceberg, which is a great mass of emotions, cognition, motivation, and beliefs, which we are not able to observe directly. Anyone wants to take an attempt at answering this one?
Put your answer in the chat, maybe.
Allison Brown suggests B. Sign says it depends on where I have access to. So A, B, or C.
Yeah, those are all great considerations. For this context, if you do have access to an expert, then I think B would be the correct answer. But also asking what experts know might directly, like in terms of A, if you ask what experts know, they might be able to only describe what you see above the observability line, that is the tip of the iceberg. And they might not be able to describe everything that is below the tip of the iceberg. And that's why it's always preferable to observe them and also have them perform a task in order to be able to see what they are doing and how they are doing it. In terms of C, yeah, it is always recommended to conduct like literature reviews of the topic, or even like doing some theoretical analysis before we dig into like the practical task analysis or the empirical task analysis. But again, just doing a literature review alone might not give you all the underlying processes and cognitions that are not observable for uncovering like what needs to be done within that task. Sometimes it's a lot of times it's important to just observe or even have the expert do the task themselves in order to uncover all these hidden things that are there below the observability line, or some things that they are not able to see themselves. Let's dive into like 4 different kinds of cognitive task analysis. And then the first 2 are categorized by approach. They are theoretical and empirical. Theoreticals are the ones which are based on theory, and we are doing modeling without even consulting students or experts about how they are doing it. And it's basically thinking more about the task on your own and creating models based on that. Empirical is based on observations. You're observing students or experts within their environment on how they're performing the task. And then we have by goals. In terms of by goals, we categorize them in terms of prescriptive and descriptive. And so prescriptive is how the task should be done. That means that how experts think the task should be done, or how they think is the right way to do the task. But then descriptive is how the task is actually done by students. And then we have this grid over here where we are categorizing each of these different types of CTAs into 4 different types. We have prescriptive theoretical, we have prescriptive empirical as well. That means that we are seeing how experts are thinking about it. We are thinking about it theoretically, how experts are thinking, but we are also thinking about it empirically by testing it with experts. That is empirical prescriptive. And then there is descriptive, where we are thinking about it in terms of how students are actually doing it. And then in descriptive, we also have the empirical one, where we are doing think alouds with novices, or we are doing difficulty factors assessment that you read about in the paper this week with novices, so that we are able to see how students are actually doing it, uncover some misconceptions or hidden steps or goals that we might not have thought about. So for theoretical prescriptive, again, we think about when we when we do a theoretical prescriptive task analysis, we think about the initial state and the final state of the task, and we determine what are the different stages that come in between these 2 stages, and we focus on the goal structure and also how the methods to complete the task. For a theoretical prescriptive, planning is very important, because that is what will help us think about the task, and then later we are able to do, like after doing a theoretical prescriptive, we do a theoretical empirical prescriptive. That means we test out what we have learned from our theory in practice with experts in this case. Theoretical descriptive again is similar to theoretical prescriptive, where we actually think about how students are going to perform the task. Empirical prescriptive again is how experts are actually performing these tasks. we collect data by observing them in their environment and how they are solving the problems. This also helps us confirm some of the theories or some of the models that we've already built out in theoretical prescriptive, where we build a model about how experts should be performing a task or how they might be performing a task. But then we verify it by looking at empirical prescriptive or doing an empirical prescriptive CTA. And then the empirical descriptive is more about how novices are actually performing the task and observing students that solve the problems, how they are actually solving these problems, what are the things that they are doing while solving the problem, what are some of the misconceptions that they might have, or even what are some of the steps they are taking which we might not have thought about at all while solving these problems. I'm going to pause here for a moment if anyone has any questions. Okay. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about how to actually perform these theoretical CTAs. One template for the same might be to think about a simple flow. Think about it in terms of a simple flow chart. Consider the final state and the initial state of the task, and knowing that the initial state will lead to some process in the final state. So Sasha, you have your hand up, and then Angela is saying she's getting audio feedback. Does anyone else have audio on?
No, I think it's your noise cancellation headphones are letting the background in when you talk. That's what I suspect it is.
Okay, I'm going to take a minute and try to find a quieter place from here.
Beth Carpenter said, it sounds like there's a man speaking in the background, I think. And Angela Thering said, yes, it happens when you are talking only.
Yeah, so while Tanvi is trying to find a quieter place, how do you guys feel about CTAs in general? Is it something you've heard before? Is it something that's completely new to you? I'm curious about your thoughts.
I
Yeah.
don't think I've heard the term CTA before, but it's something that I've definitely engaged in before. Like Tanvi was saying, didn't have the words for it, but it's definitely something I've worked with.
Right. It sounds like something really, like, I don't know, involved, right? Which it could be, but it's really just, yeah, simply trying to break down the tasks and think about things. You all probably work with subject matter experts all the time, where you need to like elicit all of this information out of them, and this gives you like a nice little framework for doing that.
Angela Thering says, I want to learn more. The C part is new. I'm only familiar with task analysis.
Yeah, so let's dive deeper into it.
And that seems
Hopefully,
better, Tanvi.
awesome. Yeah. Sorry about that. I think I was not able to get a quieter space earlier. I just stepped out.
Okay.
Awesome. So the previous slide was about thinking about the initial state and the final state. First, when we are thinking about CTAs, what you want, think about a task related to your learning objective, and think about what you want, what might be the initial state of that task and what might be the final state of that task. And again, we don't want to think about it from a student perspective or from an instructor perspective. We just want to think about the task itself. And then we also consider what might be the intermediate state between these two that helps us finally break down the task and help us reach the final state. And then finally, you also want to break down the intermediate state into multiple intermediate states and work to fill in what these intermediate steps are in order to complete the task or reach the final state. So for example, in this image, you can see that there is a initial state of an algebra story problem, and the final state is the solution to the story problem. The intermediate state in this one might be thinking about the equation that might lead to solution of the story problem. There might be one more intermediate state. Apart from just thinking about the equation, it would be solution to the equation, which would lead to the solution to the story problem. So this right here, what we have done is broken down this particular task, which is solving an algebra story problem, into multiple stages. And we thought about the initial state and the final state first, but then we thought about what might be some of the intermediate states in between in order to achieve the final state and move from the initial state to the final state. So theoretical CTAs build these cognitive models. That means that we are able to think in specifics about what might these stages be. And we can iterate on these models again by conducting further research, by conducting empirical CTAs with novices and experts. So now let's do an activity. Let's get into breakout rooms in groups of 2 or 3. So again, this breakout room assignment will be random, and each person will conduct their own theoretical CTA. Feel free to ask an OLI mentor for any help or questions that might come along the way. But the steps to doing that would be consider one of your learning objectives. And we recommend that you consider one of your harder learning objectives or a more complex learning objectives. Think of a task that assesses learning against that learning objective. And then start doing some CTA, thinking about what are the subtasks in between those tasks, in between the initial state and the final state of your particular task, and what cognitive processes are needed to complete these tasks. Thank you for writing that, Erin.
No problem.
Any questions before we jump into this activity? Awesome. Caitlin, do you have access to creating the breakout rooms and the random assignment?
Yes, give me a minute. Let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4.
Jill Haskell said, I think I really need to see this in action to understand. Allison Brown put a plus on that.
Mhm.
Jill Haskell said, yeah, breakout room, and Angela Thering said same.
Awesome. Thanks, thanks, Sasha. Yeah, let's get
Jill
into.
Kalova also agrees that she needs to see this in action.
I'm assigning the rooms
Okay.
now. Give me a minute.
Mhm.
Let's see, we got.
So by the way, this means the mentors will be randomly assigned too.
Yeah, the mentors are randomly assigned.
Yeah, so when we get into the breakout rooms, I'll probably go over a little more of that example with the story problems and talk through it a little bit.
So Aaron, I can't assign you to a room, but you'll be in room 5.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, Erin. You're muted.
Of course I am. Thank you.
It's almost like a given at this point, isn't it?
Right.
Like, oh wait, I'm in a virtual meeting. I'm talking, therefore I must be muted.
No doubt, no doubt. So one of the things that Tom V kind of glossed over here is that there are times when you think about we use this idea of a story problem because it's kind of easy to think about it this way. You have the initial state, what is the problem itself, and then you have the solution. And the idea of doing a CTA, or at least this theoretical CTA, is to really think through more of the minute steps of what is a student doing when they're trying to solve that problem. And so in the case of a story problem, we can, we didn't have to get super specific, but, you can imagine that, a story problem has the story, and there's most likely going to lead the student to figuring out what an equation is or what equation to use, and then solving the story with that equation. And as you can imagine, there's probably even more steps that you can even dive deeper into. So when you're thinking about, it's the story problem, the solution, but wait, now there's a step in there where they have to figure out the equation. So you want to make sure you note that. And then you could probably even think about even deeper that there are even smaller steps within each of these bigger boxes. So it's not just the student randomly comes up with an equation, right? And if we were doing a empirical CTA, we'd actually be looking and watching the students solve a problem like this to really figure out what are all the steps that they're doing. In a theoretical CTA, we're just really trying to imagine it, and then we can use maybe data or a more empirical way of doing this later to validate whether we did get all the steps right or not. So it is, we really did try and want to come up with some clear examples, but it's one of those things that, so much things depend. It depends on the context. It depends on the students and their prior knowledge. It depends on all the things you think about when you're trying to figure out assessment tasks for the students. So I thought it'd be, maybe even more fun just to use your real learning objectives to really just, let's dig in and try this out ourselves. So does anybody want to offer a learning objective up as a example for something? So it's like Dick and Carey's system model. Tell me more about that, if you don't mind, Tonka.
So in Dick and Carey's system model, what they do is, based on the learning outcome, they drill down to the minute tasks that a person is going to be able to do in order to then meet the bigger outcome. So is that kind of the idea? Okay.
It is the idea. And that's why, before Tom D was saying, like, you guys probably do this to some extent. I've read about it in different ways. We happen to call it cognitive task analysis. So sounds very similar. Does anybody
Okay, because I was actually I thought of the teaching an alien how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is what we always called it. So you're going through that system analysis of exactly, okay, what do I need to know? What's my pre-learning? What knowledge do I come into this with? But yeah, calling it Dick and Carey is probably better than the alien building a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
And it's funny because you use that example. I always try and get to, when I try and come up with examples, I always go to driving a car because it's something most people remember to some extent how they learned. And it's a good example because there's lots of different little tasks, and there's a written test, there's a demonstration test, there's all these pieces. So the peanut butter and jelly sandwich one is fun too, to try and tackle as well, because it's more, I don't know, you got to find things that everybody knows how to do, right? In order to use it as a good example. But let's take some, let's start with one of your, what are you guys thinking? So let's offer up a learning objective and a task from one of your actual projects. Okay, identify student engagement strategies as they apply to online courses. Interesting. Okay, so that's the learning objective, I assume, right? And then what is a task? So, okay, cool. So let me think here. Identify student engagement strategies as they apply to online courses. So I guess what would you need students to be able to identify different student engagement strategies. Okay, I almost need a whiteboard here. This is kind of I am sharing my screen, so maybe I should just open a new slide to play in. Okay, so the outcome is this big old box here.
You can open a whiteboard, can't you, Erin?
Yeah, maybe. I've never used the whiteboard in this in Zoom actually, which is interesting. Let me see. I'm not finding it. So maybe not in a breakout room, but that doesn't seem right?
My icon for whiteboards is next to the reactions at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, what's funny is I don't even have reactions at the moment. I have, oh, annotate. Well, that's not the same thing.
Maybe it's because you're sharing your screen. You might have to close.
Oh, I bet.
Stop sharing the screen and then share the whiteboard.
Yeah, let's try that. Sorry. There we go. Interesting. Okay, this is my first time doing this. Okay. Okay, I'm just gonna use a text box here and paste in the LO, learning objective. So I imagine one task that students need to do as part of this. So one of the things that we do that we didn't take you guys through yet, but we're going to do it next time, which is identifying skills for learning objectives. So usually when learning objectives are at a grain size where there's lots of components to it, it's nice to try and think about what are all those components. And one of them in this particular aspect is, they need knowledge of engagement strategies. And granted, I am just, kind of brainstorming here, really. I'm trying to think of an actual task. So they need to identify these engagement strategies. What is a way that they know to do that? So is it like given knowledge, given engagement strategies, or is it trying to think of the context as they apply to online courses? So what would they identify them from? A list that they're given? Is it strategies that they need to derive?
I don't think they will get a list of strategies, but what we might need to think about is maybe already known engagement strategies, but apply them to online. Maybe that would be a step.
So like given a list of strategies. They need to be able to apply them to an online course.
Actually, instead of apply, probably recognize which of those relate to online. Because, you know, you can play you cannot play really hide and seek in an online course. So if that's an engagement strategy, it does not apply to online.
Right. Which ones apply?
So I actually, I teach a class called Foundations of Online Education. And one of the things I have my students do in the, like, so this would be a little bit more advanced, so they'd have to apply it, but they have to create an online learning module in my course.
Mhm.
And so the first step is for them to create a plan on, and so I actually guide them through backwards design, but in that they have to demonstrate to me, like, what are they going to plan to do in their online course? So that would be a way for them to, if they're writing out like an outline, that would be a way for them to be able to identify engagement strategies, because later on in my course, they then actually have to apply that. So that may just be one option.
Going out on the course with engagement strategies identified for each of the parts of a course, or each of, this is so, it gets so funny because it gets so meta. Like, you know, we're trying to write an outline of a course, identifying strategies for each of the LOs in their course. Or would it be by LO? Would it be by, we'll just leave it like that for now. So in doing that, so they're working through and they're building their outline. So they have to identify, they have to have knowledge of the different strategies, and they have to be able to know what they're trying to accomplish in their course. This is what I was saying, it gets hard when it's so meta. I'm trying to think through, how would they, so they're given a list of strategies, and they already know the kind of course they want to build. How would they think through and identify those strategies?
I feel like they would need, I mean, I'm basing it on kind of just like what I teach, but they would need some sort of underlying theory. So for example, like interaction, like how do you establish interaction in an online course? So that's how I would stem it from. So things like community of inquiry framework, interaction theory, like those are ways that engagement like strategies are based on. So that is one thing that I would definitely include, is that there needs to be some sort of knowledge base on what makes it engaging in a classroom. And so that to me goes back to theory on that, like community of inquiry framework and interaction theory specifically are two things I think would be important.
Interaction strategy theory, and what was the second thing you said?
Community of inquiry framework. That's one of the underlying theories for online learning.
Sorry, I was thinking about something else. Community of what? Community of
inquiry framework, or the
inquiry.
seal. It was IN. Yeah, community.
Were you correcting me? I'm sorry. Did I write?
Oh, so yeah, it's
inquiry. Inquiry, not inquiry.
Yeah.
So given these theories, they would need to know when to apply them. How would they identify that? So they need to know the underlying theory and in what are those associated with specific LOs, or are they specific to, okay,
it goes more towards of like then what makes something an engagement strategy. So for instance, are you going to so we have something at our school called VoiceThread, which is an asynchronous way to do discussion forums. So the theory that underlies that is community of inquiry framework and being able to foster interaction amongst your students in an asynchronous way, which gets them engaged with each other.
Mhm.
So, so that would be an engagement strategy, is to implement a VoiceThread activity. At least that's how I'm interpreting it. I don't know if I think Jill had the.
Yeah, I'm looking at Jill's chat here. Given a list of 20 engagement strategies, identify the best strategies for asynchronous learning experience. So the problem I guess I'm having with this, or what I'm trying to think through, is we're trying to teach them and get them to practice to identify the best strategies for asynchronous learning experience. So they would have to dig in to every strategy and know, is this doable in an online course, right? Okay, Tonka. Step
I
one,
like what
listen to
Tonka just shared with the listing the engagement strategies and then recognizing which ones apply to online learning. And maybe it would also be helpful to add having them, well, this is going more than identifying probably, but I would ask for the why, which is what seems to be, I feel is missing here, is why do you feel like this is a good engagement strategy? I would also wonder with online learning, are we talking about synchronous or asynchronous with the online learning? Because I think
so that's another thing. They have to be able to identify. So it's almost like a step in here that we might be missing. It's not just the engagement strategies, it's also the mode of delivery, or which is like, is it synchronous, asynchronous? With why, Ella would likely have to be higher than just identify. I know, right? I was starting to think of that too. Evaluate student engagement strategies that apply to online courses. Evaluate, I like that better. But we're kind of demonstrating exactly, you all just helped demonstrate exactly why you do this kind of CTA, because it not only informs when you start thinking about it in these steps, right? What the student needs to do, you realize, oh, well, I think the LO needs to change as well, because we're really asking them to just identify. It's a little more than identify. If they're going to get into all of these different things, if they have to know what the engagement strategies are, and they have to know how to use them in these different modes in media, and then recognize. It's so funny because I can't help but think this is not just only for assessment, but it's also helpful in identifying the skills that are needed to be assessed for the students to be able to achieve the larger LO, right? Yes, right. Evaluate is really what you want to ask them to do. And when you start thinking about it and breaking it down like this. And it's funny because I do this naturally, don't really think about it as a CTA. I have to admit that I didn't go through the MEDALS program as a lot of my team members did. The MEDALS is the Masters of Educational Technologies and Learning Sciences at CMU. And so they learned all of this stuff very deeply and practiced it a whole bunch. I kind of came to instructional design a little differently, and I naturally, do these types of things without even having a term for it, as you all do too, I'm sure. But anyway, this was a great example because it helped us understand the learning objective better, And it gave us the steps on not only what the true learning objective is that we're trying to get the students to, but by identifying the steps, then you can make sure you can diagnose when they're not able to do it, when they start picking the wrong strategies for the wrong things in the assessment. You'll kind of have a little ready-made plan as to, well, what might be going on, which of these steps did they actually have trouble with? Maybe they didn't deeply know the engagement strategies well enough, or that this mode of delivery actually matters in choosing one. What else might be going on here? So what else is it about those engagement strategies that helps them be determined and used in different settings? Or why would you pick one over the other? You pick one over the other, not only because of the mode of delivery, but maybe yeah, I write some notes here. Why? Yeah, your audience. I was just going to say that it could be the audience prior knowledge. It could be the number of folks you have in the audience, number of learners. Because I'm sure one of those engagement strategies would be better for a smaller group rather than a larger group. Yeah, environment. Or context, setting, whatever you want to call it. Could it also be, it's not just the prior knowledge of the students, but you also might switch these strategies up depending on how the students respond. Yeah, motivation is a good one. It's also like whether it's free or if they're paying. Maybe. Those are their goal in learning it. Yeah, flexibility and tailoring. How much flexibility do they have to choose these strategies in a real world circumstance? And how much tailoring are they able to do? In a K-12 setting, you might not have the ability to tailor too much. How they're going to use it. So engagement strategies, you might even want to combine them, right? And you'd have to know why you'd want to do that. Oh, we've got 5 minutes. So I think we got a good list here. So just going through this exercise, oh, technology access, that's a good one too. So it's basically, it's like identifying factors for for the success of each of these strategies, for the success of the strategies. I don't know how else to put that. And these are, why would you pick one over the other? Technology, ease, and comfort. Yep. Access, ease, comfort. Yeah, I like that one too. It's not just access, it's how, yeah, you're going to give them engagement strategy that's super technical when they're like already not comfortable with the technology. Probably not. So I think we uncovered a lot of things just for this one, this one task. It's interesting because it started out as an identify task, and we realized that so much knowledge has to go into it that it's already at a higher cognitive level than we've identified in the LO. And then when you break it up and start to think about how students need to be successful with each step and part of this, you might start to think about, well, an assessment might be, you might want to make sure you're assessing each step separately before you have them combine and do that evaluate task. Pre versus, yeah, I like that. Yeah, is this pre-COVID or post-COVID? It's also the age of the learners, I think, too. Got the numbering steps here. Oh, I set off my screen. Let me just clean up this so I can talk through it when we come back. I'm a stickler for consistency. It's the CD in me. So yeah, there's a lot of factors that they have to identify to know which will work in which circumstances, and then identifying what those circumstances are. And then figuring out, I mean, in an online learning environment, like you're not going to be able to do certain engagement strategies that can only be done in a classroom. Oh, so maybe there's another step in here that we're missing, which is what are the factors of identify factors of online learning of the online learning environment. Because if they have to, pair them up, I cannot get the right spelling on that. Environment. I can't get a good spelling of that. I don't know why. I'm spelling it the same way, I think. Anyway, it's still working out. So what are other characteristics of online learning that they would have to match to these factors of success strategies? I guess there's a lot going on there. They'd have to unpack a lot of like what the environment really entails. And again, it's kind of along the same lines as these factors as well. It's not just about what factors of success of the strategies, but what factors of the learning environment so that they can do that kind of matching. And then interesting, I mean, you could just have, assessment questions that go through each one of these steps. And then at the end have like a big matching, assessment that just has them match them up. But in the meantime, you as a teacher would be able to diagnose if they didn't get that big matching question right and started missing things. What parts of that are they getting tripped up on? Very cool. I thought that would be harder than it ended up being. So I'm glad it ended up working out. How did you guys, well, I'll wait till we get back to the regular room to discuss like what the process was like here. But was this helpful? Was this a good example? Yeah, it is challenging. This is probably one of my favorite things to do, is to like really sit and like break down things this way, right? I wonder if we're gonna, I'm afraid that I might lose my whiteboard. I wonder what will happen. Maybe I should copy this just in case. I don't know what happens when we come back together. Yeah, it does show the challenge of working in a bubble, for sure. And imagine if we had like a different even set of people doing this kind of breakdown analysis, there might be even more things that we didn't think about. Given this short time period too. But we uncovered a lot of things just in this short time. Okay, I want to try and copy this stuff so I don't lose it when we come back together. How do I do
I
that?
think you should be able to save it, but you can definitely export it into a PDF document. I don't, if you go to the top learning engineering, there's the lines next to it for the more. If you click on more,
More.
you can hit export to PDF.
I'm not finding the more. Oh, over here. Oh, let's just do it to a PNG. Where's this gonna take me?
I know there's a way to save it too. I just, for the life of me, can't.
That's okay. It looks like it saved it to like my Zoom room. I'm gonna do it again as a PDF. Or maybe I'll just open it in a browser. And then I'll be able to share my screen and show it. There we go. I think that's the way we have to do it.
Hello, everyone. How did it go?
Well, it was fun for me. I don't know. I don't know if anyone else would describe it as fun.
Tonka Jokelova says nerdy fun, and Angela Thering says very interesting.
It was nerdy fun. That's a great way to describe it. What are some insights we got from the process? And we used a whiteboard. We used the whiteboard tool in the in Zoom, and that was the first time I was using that, so that was fun.
That's super interesting. We just used chat. But yeah, it was fun.
We were using PowerPoint.
Oh, that would have worked too. I don't mind like showing off our work and talking through our process.
Sure.
Okay.
But before
Mary,
you do
why
that,
don't you
doesn't
let one of the students do it instead of you?
Well, because I exported the whiteboard. They can certainly jump in and help to talk through it, but I'll show the whiteboard. Give me a second to get to the right screen. And I'm not sure where it went. Oh, there it is. Okay, so hold on. It's giving me all kinds of notifications here. Okay, so let me get through this whiteboard. Does someone want to talk through our process a little bit that was in our group? I would love for someone else to do that.
What we did was we came up with a learning outcome. And from there, we went into figuring out what all students need to be able to do and accomplish before they are able to reach that outcome. And towards the end of our session, we kind of figured out that we would like to add more to the outcome so that it's not, we started with the identify as actionable verb, but we realized that we need to we need to up it a little bit so that it's encompassing everything that we needed to encompass. And we changed identify finally into evaluate. And we came up with all different steps and areas of knowledge students need to have before they're able to accomplish the one learning outcome. It was interesting to see different angles that we need to consider. It was interesting to see every single possible scenarios that can come through that objective or outcome. It was overall quite an interesting and deep exercise in how people learn, I guess.
That was perfect. Thanks, Tonka. Yeah,
This is such like a superb example of why we are doing cognitive task analysis.
it really was, and it was perfect because it also helped us understand like not just what assessment items we would need to do and what scaffolding we would need to provide the students, but also how it informed the learning objective itself. Like I couldn't have picked a better topic and a better way of making this happen, right? Because that's something that you all will be thinking about as you start to do these theoretical CTAs, and you can revise your assessment items, but you can also revise your learning objectives as well from it. Oh, I want to check what's in the chat here. I'll be right back. Okay. So that was our exercise. We by the way, the LO was identify student engagement strategies as they apply to online courses. So it was even like it's kind of interesting at first because it was a little meta. We were thinking about teaching something that we are learning at the same time. It's crazy. It was wild. It was fun.
Yeah, one thing to note was we were thinking only about the task and we were not thinking about like what we are going to teach students or what we are going to be doing with students, but just thinking about, what is needed in order to solve this task is what the focus was. And I was trying to just stay in that lane and not get too much into like what we are planning to teach or what we might need to teach in order to complete the task.
Yeah. Any other insights or observations or epiphanies? I love aha moments. Anyone else have any of those to share besides the folks in my group? Yeah.
Allison Brown or Allison Bond, did you have any thoughts from our group?
Yeah, I just thought it was really helpful because going through the different steps, I had a few different aha moments, I guess. Going through the steps and seeing where some like knowledge gaps might kind of be. And for example, if I want them to create a video with captions or something, then I have to ensure that they know how to create the video, ensure how they know how to enable the captions. And there are just a lot of different steps that I hadn't anticipated prior to doing this activity. So I thought it was helpful.
Awesome.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. I was able to identify a couple of like steps to the task that I hadn't really thought about including particular information in the content, but now I will.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and so imagine that was just us sitting around thinking about it more deeply, right? That's that theoretical CTA component. Now imagine actually taking the step further and doing actual, watching students try to solve the problem, or, doing kind of that more empirical CTAs, which I think is that the next topic, Tanvi? Oh.
Yeah, that's a good point, Erin. I think we'll be diving into that next week.
Oh, that's right. Yay.
But yeah, before I dive into any other thoughts.
Yeah, any lasting impressions before we move on?
Okay. So one thing like we wanted to discuss is why focus on tasks and why not just ask an expert, or why not just think about it in terms of learning objectives or standards. We want to think more about the task itself. So it helps us think more about what is needed in order to solve that task, and allows us to think a little more deeply about the cognitive structures or processes associated with this task. And when I say cognitive structures, it's nothing but basically like what are the steps that are needed, uh, and what you want students like is something that we will also get into when we do our empirical CTA. But we also want to think like we are not thinking about topics, or we are not thinking about learning objectives when doing task analysis, because it might be ambiguous, it might be too broad. And as some of you might have seen, like Erin's group pointed out, the learning objective, they had to actually change the learning objective based on the task analysis that they did. So it helps us to, when we narrow down and think about the task, it actually helps us to think about, okay, what do we want to do, or what is the task at hand that is going to help us interpret that learning objective, or learning against that learning objective.
Yeah, and I just want to note that when the reason we started with learning objective is I said, well, let's start with the learning objective and then see what kind of assessment or task we need to have done. But the learning objective was kind of, as we found out through the exercise, it was a task in a way, and it ended up being like one task of a larger learning objective is what that ended up uncovering. So cool.
And then the importance of doing theoretical CT at this stage, where you have already, described some of the learning objectives, but you have not gone into like developing your assessments, is it allows us to actually identify all the tasks that you might want to add within assessments, and some kind of performance that you might want to measure against those within those assessments. It also identifies hidden learning objectives. So many of y'all pointed out that there were things y'all discovered that, oh, these are the things that we might need to include within the scope of the syllabus in order for students to be able to perform that task. And so we are able to uncover hidden learning objectives that we might not have earlier considered. And this theoretical CT at this stage will also be used in our next lecture, where we will be doing an empirical CTA and improving the theoretical model that was developed. And we'll be using the data that we have collected from the empirical CTA to improve this theoretical CTA. And in turn, improve the course that you all are working on. And there are many other ways of doing CTAs, which are a little more complex than what you all saw earlier. This is an example of a flowchart where you see branching flowcharts with multiple junctures and end states and several categories of actions. This CTA represents a simple game, but it includes steps such as listening to directions and dealing with cards and junctures at high level versus low level interest. And know that this is just an example of CTAs, so know that CTAs can get complicated, and not to be too afraid of getting into like the weeds of like, okay, what are the intermediate steps, or oh, these steps need to be broken down further. It would be helpful to get into like the lowest level of granularity when you all are performing the CTA. And another way of performing the theoretical CTA is by drawing out a concept map. In this particular example, you can see there is a concept map which represents a CTA of concepts related to seasons with nodes such as amount of sunlight and length of day, and lines describing connections between them. Empirical CTA, we have contextual inquiry as one of the methods of an empirical CTA. And this is something that we've been talking about, but also you all have read one empirical CTA method within your readings, which is the difficulty factors assessment. Another method is the contextual inquiry, where you're not just asking experts what they know, but because, as earlier mentioned, they might only know 30% of what they actually know. And you need to actually go in and observe them performing those concrete tasks in the context of their environment. And then you need to interpret and build those models based on the observations that you make on how they are performing the tasks. You need to also check your insights and models in partnership with those experts. And you basically are making them allies, and you're not just observing them, but at some point also verifying how your model checks with respect to how they are performing the task. And you're also using these models or the empirical task analysis to actually improve the learning goals within the project. And then structured interviews are also another examples of empirical CTAs, where you have different questions already mapped out on what you will be asking these experts when you are in the context of their work and seeing them perform their task. For example, like, why did you do that? Or can you explain what you were thinking while performing that particular task or particular action within a task? Now, as you know that theoretical CTAs can get complex, and depending on the learning objectives, they can have like less steps or more steps. But we've been thinking about CTAs, and we've been drawing models of the task analysis that we have been doing. We've also been talking a little bit about learning models during our first and second lectures. So we wanted to think about what is a learning model in the context of your project. A, is it a flow chart of the steps a student has to complete to do a task? Is it a theoretical cognitive task analysis for every step in the course? Or is it learning objectives mapped to each assessment task?
Again, you can put your answer in the chat or you can say it out loud.
Thanks, Caitlin.
Sign says A. All right, raise your hand if you think it's A. We did not get any votes for A. Raise your hand if you think it's B. Danica Nowoselsky suggested, how about all of the above? Raise your hand if you think it's all of the above. Allison Brown said, I was going to say C, shrug. And Beth Carpenter says, I'm thinking C.
Does anyone want to clarify why they think either of these options?
I just was thinking C because the first two seemed very granular in terms of thinking about a learning model, as I was understanding learning model.
Yeah, so that's correct, actually. In the context of this project, or in the context of the learning engineering philosophy, we think about learning model as all the learning objectives or skills that are mapped to each assessment task within your course design project. And A and B are more related to the cognitive task analysis, and they are not actually the learning model itself. Also, one more thing to note while writing, while thinking about cognitive task analysis is you do not need to write. Ideally, you would want to write CTAs for every single question or every single learning objective within your course. but we don't have all those times and resources. And so for now, you might want to think about at least doing CTAs for the very important or the higher level cognitive level tasks that are, or learning objectives that are there within your syllabus. And again, this is as you can see, there is an image on the right hand side which shows an illustration of a learning model which maps all the skills within a course to all the assessments within a course, and each of them are connected. You can see each of the skills are connected to at least one assessment, and each assessment has at least one skill connected to them. Any questions before we move on to assessment design?
So
moving on.
Yeah, so we have what, 7 minutes left? Is that correct? This time went really
Sorry,
fast.
Erin.
It's okay. We packed a lot in, and you all will be reading more about this in Taurus anyway. So I'm going to kind of fly through some of this stuff. And if you stop sharing your screen, I'll share my screen instead. So no worries. I think the stuff about CTA was really important and exciting and fun. And assessment design, we're just going to tell you a lot of like tips and tricks and things. I'm going to fly through it. And then I might even save, let's save the demo for either office hours or next week or something like that. Because it's pretty simple. We can work with you all separately on how to actually do this in Taurus, in the Taurus system. So apologies that we're going to shortchange you on the demo. So one of the ways CLE can aid in assessment, evaluation, and design is really, it's simply the more complex the knowledge component, as described in CLE, the more complex the assessments, as something that's pretty obvious, I think, to most folks who design assessments, right? When you're doing facts versus skills versus principles, those are going to require more steps and probably more combinations of assessment items to really get at all the knowledge components going on in those processes. Of course, Bloom's, you all know how to use Bloom's, I'm sure. And again, the more complex you go up the pyramid. So this is a picture of Bloom's taxonomy. As most folks know, with remember and understanding towards the bottom and creation at the top. Moving from remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating, and with some just more additional descriptions of each of those phases. And as you know, the more you get to evaluate and analyze, the more complex assessments are going to be needed. So just kind of a note on those two models. Want to make sure that we are aligning all of our objectives, our assessments, and instructional strategies. So this was just a note to remember that course triangle, which is showed here on the right, basically showing that learning outcomes, what students should be able to know and do it in the course, ties and is aligned to instructional content and ties and aligns to the activities and assessments you provide. Not a whole lot of novel information there for you. So do you think this question aligns with the LO? And I should probably be viewing this as a slideshow so it's not so small to everybody. So what do you guys think? Do you think this question aligns to this learning objective?
Raise your hand if you think that it does align to this learning objective.
I think it's hard to know because I don't know what those two losses are, so I actually don't know if that's one of the two answers.
And Sign says, without understanding the context, I'm thinking yes.
So to me, it looks like the question is identification and the outcome is distinguishing. So it can be part of that, but I don't think it fully aligns.
And that's really the correct answer here. Oops, I thought I had an answer slide. Wait, distinguish between, is this the same thing? Oh, it's the same question, right? Yeah, I might have messed up when I was fixing and editing the slides. Whoa. So I agree. It kind of aligns, but because the learning objective is distinguish, we're really only getting at one part of the answer. And this is something that would align if you know, in an assessment with multiple questions. But the idea is that you want to make sure that the alignment is happening and that you're comprehensive as well when you're assessing.
And Jill Haskell says the question is really asking you to define one way, not tell the difference between the two.
That's right. That's exactly right. So some things when you're writing good feedback. So we're just gonna skip ahead. We were talked about alignment a little bit. Now we're going to be talking about writing feedback. So we encourage and really require as part of our system writing targeted feedback to all answer options. And some tips and tricks for doing that are here's some tips and tricks. I don't want to go over all of this because we're about out of time. But again, you'll be reading this as part of the instructional material for the next week that you have to dig into in Taurus. But just some things here. I try to be as clear as possible when writing feedback. You don't want to leave any ambiguity in the feedback for the student. So you don't want to say, make references to it or they without really just defining or describing what that is, because you want this feedback to also stand alone. You also don't want it to give away the answer. You want to feel like you're tutoring the student, like you're a one-on-one tutor. And if you were watching the student work through a problem, what are those subtle nudges you would be giving them to get to the right answer? And you need to be very clear about why an answer is both correct or incorrect. So of course, incorrect is easy to know. Correct, we do that in case the students are guessing or they didn't fully understand and they just kind of thought maybe that was the right answer. You want to reinforce that learning for them. And then just when you're building things in a platform like Taurus, you want to be formatting things very similarly, especially if you're rating, if you're building a course with multiple people, you want to kind of standardize on those things because students then come to expect how to read that feedback very quickly and get through the course. So we were going to go through an activity where we fix this assessment, but I'm going to, which would have been fun actually, but I'm going to skip to the components of a good assessment. So making sure that the assessment is aligned to the learning objective, and so that you get that meaningful data. When you look at the data, you're actually knowing something about what the students know or don't know. That the question is clear, it's appropriately difficult and has relevant distractors, and each choice has feedback. So these were some things that kind of were missing from this particular assessment. So the project work for this week is to start drafting assessments. So for each learning objective, have a task the student can do to demonstrate that learning, perform a theoretical CTA to get at all the steps in performing that task, and draft an assessment based on that. And you'll be doing this and submitting that work through Taurus. And just so I was going to give you a quick highlight, this will be embedded in along with the assignment, but we have a rubric for developing assessments that aligns with some of the things we just talked about very quickly, mind you. And then we also have rubrics that will help guide your thinking through and evaluating different types of questions as well, like multiple choice or long response, open-ended. So so very sorry that we shortchanged you on that demo and the fun of evaluating assessment questions, but you will be getting into more of that in your instruction over the next week. And I hope you found this session really helpful. So sorry we're a minute over to try to be respectful of time. I'm willing to stay on if you have any questions or want to dig into anything in particular, but if not, thanks everyone and have a great rest of your day.
Allison Brown says, thanks everyone. Danica says thank you. Angela Thering says thank you. Tonka Jokelova says thank you. And Beth Carpenter says, I've got to head out. Thank you for a fun and nerdy time.
I love it. There's nothing I love more than having these types of workshops with like-minded folks.
I should note the celebrate emoji as well. Someone did a celebrate emoji.
Nice, nice. Okay, it's just us now. How did that go? How was
Stop.
your breakout rooms?
Stop the recording.
Oh yeah, thanks.